Season 34 has just ended, and Season 35 is about to start. It looks like it is going to be a somewhat green season, so green might not be the worst color. It's also looking like a combo-heavy season. Blue control is back as well. So let's see what's leaving from last season. We're losing a lot of things from the red aggro decks, with Chain Lightning and Price of Progress leaving, as well as Forsaken Miner and Priest for Aristocrats. So both the red deck wins and Aristocrats are getting a lot worse, though Aristocrats can definitely still exist. A lot of blue things are leaving, though these aren't that important, these three, since we are getting replacements. Blue Storm is going to get a lot better and a lot worse. It's not really going to be possible in Season 35 because we just don't have Frantic Search or Mind's Desire. Also leaving Elspeth for Orzhov control, Torrential Gearhulk for whatever blue control decks wanted it, Lively Dirge. Necrotic Ooze could still be good even without it, but I would definitely prefer to have Lively Dirge. Kumano just makes red deck wins probably unplayable. Orange Chat, we are getting Silence, or we're keeping it, so it's not that big of a deal. Rofellos for the mono green ramp decks is leaving, not that those really mattered, but no Fanatic of Ronus things. Hermit Druid is leaving, even though we are getting Dread Return, so it kinda was legal at the wrong time. Hardened Scales is out. We are getting some cards that would have been good in Hardened Scales in Hanger Backwalker, but Hardened Scales just isn't going to be possible. Hogak is also leaving. Unfortunately, it missed Dread Return. Also leaving are Ravenous Trap. It didn't really do anything in Season 34, but we are going to have more graveyard decks in Season 35, and we really don't have any graveyard hate. It's really just Silent Gravestone that we're keeping. Profane Tutor is bad for the combo decks. It shouldn't be too impactful, though they probably are still pretty good. The Rand Portal is leaving, so the mana for fast decks is worse. I want to play several colors. Lotus Bloom is leaving, so again, no Storm is really possible. No Tameshi Bloom, though people didn't really play that in Season 34. Bitter Blossom is leaving for the black mid-range or slower decks. Vendilion Click is leaving for the Librarians or whatever else wanted it. Not that they always played it. Vesuva is leaving. We are getting Glimmer Post and keeping Cloud Post, so Cloud Post is still possible, just not with Vesuva. So we still haven't gotten 12 Post. Kaya's Guile is leaving, so Orzhov control is just getting a lot worse. Unburial Rites is leaving, so no Gifts Ungiven Unburial Rites deck unless you want to play Priest of Rites in Esper. So green is getting a lot better, and it's because of these cards. Nadu is legal now, because it got banned everywhere else, or just in Modern. And we are getting Sylvan Safekeeper and Springheart Nantuko. There aren't really any combos with it that are cheap. At 4 mana we have some things that can pay 0 to target a creature, but nothing cheaper than that, I believe. A lot of people have been wondering if Nadu would be completely broken. I don't think it's going to be that good. I doubt it will even be the best deck. I think even if we got Shaman and Core, which is a 2 mana thing that can pay 0 to target a creature, I think even if we got that, it wouldn't have been the best deck. So I do expect it to show up a lot, but I don't think it will break the format. Grist, Voracious Larva, is legal, somehow. That is a Flipwalker. When it transforms, it turns into Grist, which can +1 to make a 1/1 and maybe give it Death Touch, can -1 to destroy target artifact or enchantment, and has a ultimate that probably wins the game. I don't think this is very good, because +1 make a 1/1 is really the only thing it does when you flip it, and that's not that powerful, especially since you're probably not getting this out until at least turn 3. It could be interesting with Flare of Cultivation, which we are also getting. But I don't think there are any decks that can already do this, can already transform it, and we aren't getting Luris. We're losing Luris, which I probably should have brought up, but we are losing Luris, so that doesn't work with Grist. But I think no deck can naturally flip Grist, and no deck wants to build a deck around this because it's just not powerful enough. Flare could be playable elsewhere, but I'm not really sure where. It could be played in Elves. I don't know if Elves really wants that, though. Could be played in some kind of Nadu deck, though they don't necessarily have that many cheap green creatures. Bloodbraid Challenger. It's unclear if there are any decks that will want this, as it's a Gruul card that's expensive and really can only be played in mid-range, and you don't really want to be in Gruul colors if you're a mid-range deck. But it is a very powerful card. It's like Bloodbraid Elf, but it has escape, and it's a little more expensive and bigger. Berserk for Blazing Shoal, Infect, maybe just random stompy decks. We are getting Blazing Shoal. I think it's staying, but we do have Blazing Shoal. Infect is probably not going to be possible, I think. I believe we have Phyrexian Crusader, but I don't think Infect will be very good, because we don't have very good pump spells. We don't have that many creatures, I think. Though it could be a thing in Golgari. And then it's good with Blazing Shoal. If you Blazing Shoal for 10 and then play Berserk, that's 20 damage at least. It could also just be played in Stompy. If you have a 5 power creature and use Berserk twice, that's 20 power. So it's interesting in a lot of random green decks with creatures. Elodamri for Elves and maybe something else. And we are getting 8 Llanowar Elves in, I believe, Fintorn Elves and Llanowar Elves itself, and not getting Elvish Mystic. So we have 8 Dorks. So it actually is possible to play Elves, and we have Defiler of Vigor. So it does have some payoffs. 6, I'm not sure what this does, but again, a Modern Horizons 3 card. Giving all of your non-land cards in hand Retrace is a very powerful ability, but you have to be playing a somewhat slow green deck, which has not done well in the past, so it's unclear if this will be good in Season 35. We are getting the Amalia combo with Wild Growth Walker to make a large creature with 20 power, and you wrath the board. If it doesn't have Summoning Sickness, you just attack for lethal. If it does, and they remove it, you can find Aetherflux Reservoir, because you explored a bunch of times, so you can just look for your Aetherflux Reservoir. You're not guaranteed to find it if it's a 1-of, or you're not guaranteed to find it regardless, but if it's a 1-of, there's a good chance you won't find it, but you probably want just one Aetherflux Reservoir if you're playing this. It's unclear if this will actually be good. It's Abzan, which is kind of bad. A bad color combination to be in. The mana is not great. And it's kind of been compared to Nadu as a worse Nadu. But it's not necessarily worse, since it actually does win if you get the combo, unlike Nadu. Well, usually. The main problem, I think, is it's kind of hard to actually start the loop, because you need to either gain life or explore, and it's kind of hard to do that. But obviously there are quite a few ways, but none of the cards are very good, I think. So that could be a challenge. We also are getting Weight of the Reliquary, which I don't think is very good. It's a Boneyard Worm with a slight upside, but it's interesting. Some more new cards. Invert Polarity. I think this card is extremely good. I think that there's a good chance Izzet Control is just the best blue color combination because of this. This card is so incredibly powerful. So half the time it is just going to gain their spell, which is significantly better than countering it. A lot of the times it just wins the game to take any large creature. So I think this is by far the best counterspell we've ever gotten. So we have Memory Lapse and this, which could just be your entire counterspells. That could be your entire counterspell suite. Now, I think this could be really good. The main problem with Izzet Control is that the removal spells are bad. The Wraths are also bad if you aren't playing Ill-Timed Explosion. So that could be a challenge, but this card is just so good that it kind of makes up for that, I think. Cryptic Command for blue control decks. It might not actually be good, but it's interesting to see if this old modern staple can be good in PD. Unsettled Mariner. This is really good for the M-Dog Soldiers deck from Season 33. It's a human soldier, and it gives your entire board Ward 1. I think this is a really good reason to be in Azorius as an aggro deck, and human's already pretty good, I think, with Flowering of the White Tree. So I think this will be a pretty good deck. Glagon's Command for Rakdos midrange. I don't think this is very playable since Rakdos midrange isn't really a thing you can do. Or it's not a good thing. But it will probably be played in some 3-color decks. I don't think it's very playable though. Lelia is potentially good in red midrange. It's unclear if it will actually do anything though. It might just be bad. Because you kind of need to untap with it to get value out of the first ability. Cruel Claw's Heist is basically the best Pilfer we've ever gotten. The best 2-mana Thoughtseize ever. Though you need to be able to spend 2 black pips on it. But it is very powerful to be able to cast their card. This would have been really good in Orzhov Control Mirrors this season. And yeah, basically any deck in black that can actually support the mana should probably be playing it somewhere. Since we aren't getting, well actually we are getting Duress, I think. We are keeping Duress. So if you just want a Duress for control decks, it might not be good enough if you're playing aggro or something. Phalia for the Yorion piles. It is basically a soul herder for 2 mana that needs to not die to blockers. It can also hit non-land permanents, or non-creature permanents. So Sporogenic Infection is a lot like Tithing Blade. It's a 2 mana, make your opponent sacrifice a creature, so if you can repeatedly blink that with Phalia, this is very good. And Orzhov, the Orzhov Yorion deck could just be one of the best decks this season. Jackdaw Savior is like a aura for flying creatures. Aura is a cleric for 4 mana that basically has the same text but for clerics instead of creatures with flying, where when a creature you control with that thing dies, it returns a smaller one. This doesn't have to return creatures with flying, but that's probably not that relevant. It is kind of bad that flying tribal isn't really a supported thing outside of this, and you kind of don't care about creatures dying as much as clerics do, so it might not be that good. But it is kind of a decent card by itself, even if you aren't playing many other flyers. It just dies and gets back a 2-drop or something. Spellskite. This could be really good with Nadu. It does trigger Nadu twice by targeting it, by making itself become the target of a spell twice, I believe. Actually, I'm not sure if this triggers it twice, because I think if it's already targeting the Spellskite, then it wouldn't count, but I'm not sure. But this does just basically counter a removal spell while it's in play. So if they try to target your Nadu with a kill spell, you just kill Spellskite instead. You can also do this with Unctus, which is going to be a lot better this season. So Nadu, Unctus, basically any combo deck that wants creatures. And potentially even decks that aren't combo, just to play around removal. Some more new cards. We have Hanger Backwalker, which doesn't really matter without scales. We have Kithian, which is really good for flowering decks and any Champion of the Parish deck. It's a 1-mana legendary human, basically. It's also a soldier for Azorius soldiers. But this is really good for any kind of Flowering of the White Tree deck. I think Boros Legends will be the best aggro deck this season, in part due to Kithian. We're also getting Nettle Cyst, which is comparable to Cranial Ram, where it starts with a creature, can equip. It's basically 1 more mana and easier to cast, to also give it toughness. I think this card is really good. It's kind of bad since we don't have a lot of affinity things, and you really want to play this in affinity, but it's probably playable somewhere even in a deck that isn't pure affinity. Sword of Feast and Famine probably doesn't do anything. The swords in general don't really matter that much in PD. but I do think this is the strongest sword ever. So maybe it does something in some kind of control-ish deck. We do have Squadron Hawk, so you could try to do it with that. Maybe like Azorius Control with Cawblade, really. And we're also getting Mystic Forge, which is really only playable in the Bob 49 deck with Metalwork Colossus and Semblance Anvil. Because you can filter the... Basically, your artifacts are going to cost 0 mana off the top. And you can use the ones that draw a card in your hand to filter out lands off the top. So this lets you go... Basically, it lets you play your whole deck fairly easily. Not your whole deck, because you're limited by what you have in hand. But it could potentially get you a lot of your deck in play. I do think this deck is a huge upgrade for that. This card is a huge upgrade for that deck, if it ends up being good. We did not get Defense Grid, which is a pretty big downside. And there are potentially a lot of better combo decks, so it might be outclassed, but this is a pretty big upgrade, I think. We're getting Elish Norn, which is probably not very relevant. If you can transmogrify into it in a tokens deck, it's pretty good, I guess. But you really can't reanimate it because Persist is going to be the best reanimation spell, which is potentially good in Necrotic Ooze, potentially good with Unmarked Grave and Buried Alive just to tutor big things into your graveyard, like Sarah's Emissary. And this, I mean, it could just make Necrotic Ooze good. But it's really kind of similar to Animate Dead. It's kind of just a worse Animate Dead. So it's not that exciting. It's not really new. It's not a new effect. Cavalier Flame, potentially good in Fires of Invention, which I think we still have. But it probably doesn't do that much. Ashiok Nightmare Muse could be good in Dimir Control. Probably not, though. It's probably just not that good of a card. So returning cards, Champion of the Parish, Thalia, and Flowering are coming back, so this is why human Legends decks are going to be good this season. Like Boros Legends probably doesn't want Champion, but wants Flowering, Thalia, Kythian. There are a lot of 1-mana Legends. Then there's Mary still. Thalia is really good in this deck because it stops Wraths. I do think this deck will be the best aggro deck of the season, Boros Legends. But you could also just play Mono White. You could play Azorius with Soldiers and Unsettled Mariner. You could just play Mono White Humans with Champion of the Parish, Thalia, Flowering, Thalia's Lieutenant. But yeah, white aggro does seem quite good this season. Especially since red aggro is getting so much worse. Oust, very good for control decks, Azorius Control specifically. Probably doesn't do much outside of that. And Azorius Control is actually looking pretty decent this season since we do have Memory Lapse. And Memory Lapse. This makes blue control decks much better than any blue deck, really. It's just the best counterspell in the format, outside of maybe Invert Polarity. But that can only be played in Izzet. So this could make Azorius Control good. It probably means that Orzhov Control is not really going to be much of a thing this season, since you'd rather just play a blue control deck like Azorius or Izzet Control. Also good for blue combo decks potentially, though it really depends on the deck. Spell Queller probably doesn't do too much, but could be played in Azorius Librarians. Maybe some kind of Azorius tempo deck. Ancestral Vision could be played in any kind of blue control pile. I'm not sure if it actually does that much. I'm sure people will play it in all kinds of control piles, though. Ill-Timed Explosion, potentially the good Wrath for Izzet, but you do need to have some expensive cards. We do have Dig Through Time, which is good, but you probably need more than that. High Tide. So we don't have Frantic Search, and we don't have Turnabout, so you can't actually play a Storm deck. But you can play something like Ghostly Flicker with Archaeomancers, and we don't have actual Archaeomancer. We have some 5-mana options, and you can go infinite with that. But no actual Storm decks. Some more returning cards, Impulse, a blue cantrip. We don't have any 1-mana cantrips in blue that are better than like Quicken, or a card with cycling. So this is kind of the best filter for blue. Stoic Sphinx, good for blue tempo and Librarians. Could be good with Spell Queller and Azorius tempo. Could just be mono blue. Ethereal Armor, really good for Heroic. Or just any kind of Aura's Voltron deck. We are also getting Shard Mage's Rescue, which is a card from Bloom, or I think it's Bloomburrow, maybe it's Duskmourn. But it gives the creature hexproof. It has flash, and +1/+1 for 1 white. Dread Return, so any deck that can mill its entire deck just gets to actually win the game on the spot by milling over Narcomoebas and Dread Return. Now, we don't have Oops, but we do have Unctus with either actual Unctus or with Mesmeric Orb. And the creature you use for this is Fate Stitcher. You get 2 of them and they untap each other. And whether you have Unctus or Mesmeric Orb in play, you can just flip your deck and win the game. You don't actually need Narcomoeba for that because you just have Fate Stitchers in play. Mishra's Factory could do something. I'm not sure. Aggro probably can't play this. It's too mana intensive to play wastes. Potentially in mono white though. And could be played in some monocolor midrange. I'm not really sure though. Living Death and Crypt of Agadim for Midnight Mass. So you play a bunch of black creatures with cycling to make Crypt of Agadim make mana, and you play Living Death instead of the Archfiend or whatever. Bringer of the Last Gift, actually. It's a Living End for 5 mana that doesn't suspend. And you basically swap the graveyard with the battlefield. So you just have a bunch of things in your graveyard and they win the game when you put them in play. Dam for any Aura subdeck, which might not be a thing, so it probably doesn't actually do that much. It's also potentially good if you have Gifts Ungiven in your control deck. You can play 4 different Wraths. Glimmer Post, as I mentioned earlier. We have Cloud Post, but no Vesuva. So our red deck wins is kind of just going to die. Aristocrats is going to get worse, and the other aggro decks are getting better, so it's probably not going to be very good. Hardened Scales is completely dead because no Hardened Scales. Boros Legends is probably the best aggro deck, potentially a different white human aggro deck. Blue control piles are actually going to be good this season, I think. This is going to be a combo season, most likely, because of Nadu, Unctus, Necrotic Ooze potentially. Something else would persist. It might not be that much combo, especially if Nadu turns out to be not very good. And then green might actually not be the worst color. It's possible that if Nadu is bad, then green is just... I mean, if Nadu is bad, green is probably just the worst color still. But it's actually kind of looking like red right now. So far, people haven't really played red. I don't think anyone has played Boros Legends, even though that's probably the best aggro deck. But I do think that kind of means... Well, it's possible that red isn't very good outside of Boros Legends and Izzet Control, and it's possible that Invert Polarity isn't enough to make Izzet Control good. So if Boros Legends is the only red deck, then it's actually just the worst color in the format, potentially. And that is it for my rotation video. You might have noticed I had the white borders. It would have taken a lot more time to remove them, so I didn't do that. But yeah, that's my rotation video. The rotation happened about 9 hours ago, 9.5. So people have already started playing, and people are kind of trying Nadu out, I think. A lot of Nadu, some Berserk. And yeah, that is my rotation video for Season 35.